Sir, the odds of successfully navigating an asteroid field are 2 to 1!
Never tell me the... Oh, actually, that's not bad.
We're gonna get pulverized out here.
Look, we got 4 or 5 of the main characters on this ship. I think we'll be fine.
Consequences in stories. The way they are shown to us through movies, video games and TV shows, and how well executed they are, has been on my mind quite a bit recently. Speaking very broadly here, I feel that every story needs some form of result from a negative event. It's extremely important to see some of our favourite characters go through hardships, so that they can learn and grow from that unfortunate experience, and hopefully once we've reached the positive resolution of the story, it can feel just that bit more satisfying. Consequences give stakes to the story, they give an understanding to the setting, and ultimately give us that human side to the characters we're following. Without those key elements, what we're left with is a very bare bones plot, in which the character breezes their way through the narrative, leading to a very bland piece of media overall. And when I say there has to be a consequence, that doesn't necessarily mean there has to be a death scene per se. Okay, I'm gonna stop with these Family Guy references now. But yeah, there are plenty of films that contain some form of emotional consequence and don't touch upon death in any way. Pretty much just anything that gets your heart beating, puts you on the edge of your seat, or make you feel a certain way towards the character is just as effective. But death can certainly have an impact and put a lot more of the narrative into perspective for you. An example of a video game that does this really well is Halo Reach. Now obviously being a prequel in the Halo series, it means that you full well know the consequences of the campaign leading into it, and one can make the argument that prequels can often delegitimize the consequences, because nothing will end up being a shock to you, meaning that some of that initial impact could potentially be stripped away. Personally, I believe this can sort of spoil that mystery experience from A to B, but it's that journey and how much is explored between the A to B that resonates with us the most. So witnessing your whole fire team being taken down one by one, sometimes in extremely noble ways, other times feeling very abrupt, really highlights the harshness and just unfortunate reality. So by the time it comes around to your player making that same noble decision, it turns a bizarre science fiction video game into something very grounded that gets to you every time. Makes that story feel so much more memorable, and being a great staple in what the series reflects. Conversely, you can take something like Spider-Man 3, which really taints a huge consequence from its first installment. Peter becoming Spider-Man in the first movie, at least in a more heroic form, is entirely set up after trying to seek revenge on the robber who killed Uncle Ben. The consequence in the plot is even more powerful since Peter had the opportunity to stop the robber merely moments ago. Unfortunately, Spider-Man 3 completely invalidates this by stating it wasn't that particular guy all along. Now whilst Uncle Ben's death is a huge consequence alone, it doesn't quite follow up with that same impactful redemption when you include the context from the third movie. Fortunately, there are many more well executed consequences in that trilogy that more than are up for it. But unfortunately, franchises reducing the consequences of their previous movies is becoming rather common nowadays. The most egregious example of this in recent times has to be Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
No one's ever really gone.
Wow, no one has ever really gone? Well, that says it all, doesn't it? Episode 9 is a flawed movie from the get-go. Bringing back Palpatine is quite possibly the most stupid decision that's ever been made in this franchise. When death has no long-lasting effect in your series, it strips away not only all believability, like apparently your eyes lied to you, but how are we, the audience, meant to react whenever a character dies in future Star Wars movies? Oh no, it's okay, you don't have to be shocked or upset because no one is ever really gone. The writers are essentially telling us that Darth Vader died for nothing. Anakin Skywalker, the man who was supposed to be the chosen one, but would often let his arrogance get the better of him, and eventually gets manipulated into joining the dark side. But when Luke Skywalker sets out on an epic journey, he stops to no end to redeem his father because he can still sense the good in him. And towards the climax of the story, Vader sees Luke being tortured by the Emperor, and he sacrifices himself not only for Luke, but for the greater good of the galaxy. It was such a noble death and truly an ultimate consequence in the Star Wars series. But The Rise of Skywalker says, hell no. Let's bring back Palpatine and let Rey defeat him this time.
Well, that was a much more dignified end for him.
Bringing back the Emperor wasn't the only weird decision made in this movie, because partway through the film, they established that Jedi can now force heal. Why? So going forward into a theoretical or inevitable episode 10, all stakes will be completely removed, because a slight wound from a laser blaster all the way up to being stabbed with a lightsaber can now be healed just like that. But in actuality, I have more questions for why this was never used before. So we look back at all these moments through the Star Wars franchise and start scratching our heads, because technically there should be zero consequences to events such as Order 66, because the characters should just be able to force heal. Why don't they do that? And I know a lot of people will counter to this by saying that Star Wars is a huge franchise, and it's been passed down through various different creative people, so ideas will clash. But to me, there's no excuse. You have to stay faithful to what came before, for your series to remain consistent and appropriately work off the prior consequences. And you can absolutely achieve that, because the best example of a franchise movie that does this really well is Logan. In a strange way, Logan actually starts off with zero stakes. In a world where mutants are extinct, there are no consequences. And well, there's nothing more dangerous than a man with nothing to lose. As the film progresses, a young girl by the name of Laura is introduced. Turns out that she has the exact same genetics as the Wolverine.
What is she? She's your daughter, Logan.
And now the tables have completely turned. Suddenly there is so much at stake in this film, and Logan has everything to lose.
You may not love her, but she is your child. Please, I beg you, take her to safety.
And now for the spoiler talk. Logan loses Charles, a mentor, a close friend of his for decades now. Losing him makes Logan just feel weaker and only suffer the pain more. When we reach the end portion of the story, Logan knows he has to be strong against the threat. For him, for the last remaining mutants, for Laura. And going out in the most tragic but extremely dignifying way is obviously a tragic consequence for all the characters we've seen in this series. But that honourable way of going is absolutely beautiful for the story, and makes the true breathtaking ending of this franchise feel remarkable.